Welcome to Viewpoint, the program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. Going to have a little perspective this morning. You got a nice personality.
Yes.
Well, his mother's proud of him, and I know that.
Well, that's a good start,
and
right
his dear
there.
wife. Well, both of you who listen regularly, will recall that we always try to start Viewpoint with a kudo or two. Last night I went down to the honor flight, welcome home, for the group that went out to Springfield, or to Washington from Springfield yesterday. 50th honor flight from the Land of Lincoln chapter. 50 flights. Wow. At about $90,000 a pop.
I'm sure. How many?
That money is raised nickels, dimes, and hundreds. Well, they had 83 veterans this time. And very few, of course, by this point in time, very few blue shirts.
Yeah.
Blue shirts being the World War II veterans. As a matter of fact, I got to kick some of those, welcome them back, and the Vietnam veteran says, "My God, were you in the Second War?" That made a fellow feel real good. But anyway, thanks to the auspices, the good auspices of Joyce and Aaron Leisman, who run an Uber service. By the way, they and their son Adam are deeply involved in the honor flight. Adam is kind of responsible for that process now when they take off and to go to Washington and come back. And Adam Leisman does a great job and has been a volunteer for a number of times. And Joyce and Aaron, they take flags down, and they saw them at the door. And they buy these flags and tell them, and then turn the money over to the honor flight. And first thing you know, it's $500, $600. So, volunteers. Speaking of volunteers, and this really is a really big kudo. If you drove by the Veterans Park on Union Street yesterday,
yes,
you saw some guys out there on their hands and knees, and ladies. They brought a horse tank in there, a big water trough. Each one of those stones on the Veterans Park have been taken up individually, scrubbed, and marked, and put back exactly where it was. It's a painstaking job, and it's a time-consuming job. And as I speak this morning, there'll be people out there, if they're not there now, they'll be showing up, taking all those stones up and just literally redoing that monument.
I know, and
and
they've got
veterans,
a lot of people out there.
Yeah, right.
They have, just working away, and Chris, I don't know if you've noticed, but it's been hot. Just wanted to draw that to your attention.
As a matter of fact, we're going to pillory him for that. So let's get down to serious business and introduce our guest this morning.
Oh, well,
with
it's
great thanks to the veterans, by the way, who do that work out there.
Yes, please. Our old buddy Chris Miller here has been. Now, how many years did you say with the National Weather Service?
That's 30 years last month.
That's
30
hard to
years.
believe.
Yeah, it is hard to believe. And
yeah.
I've seen so many changes over the 30 years. Oh. Unbelievable. Just in the technology.
Not only in technology and the people who man the machines, but in weather patterns.
Oh, yes.
Now, tell me what is a weather pattern and how come they vary?
Well, yeah, I'll tell you what, a weather pattern is simply, we call them air masses, and essentially it's this mass of air, a bunch of air that has certain characteristics. So it's either warm or cool, dry, humid, that type of thing. And when we get into specific weather patterns, our weather patterns are given to us, driven toward us by our jet stream, which is the high wind velocities that are up where the jets fly, which is why we call it the jet stream, about 35,000 feet above the ground.
Oh, that is clever. I thought it was something deep and meaningful.
Oh, no. No, just talk to a pilot. They'll tell you. They if they're flying the big planes, they love to catch the tailwind of the jet stream because they're gonna
save on gas.
They plan for that. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the airlines plan for that because they're looking for, how can we do this the most economical way? And so if they can hit the jet stream going from the west coast to the east coast, they'll ride that. And you get winds. This time of the year, it's a little lighter. It's not quite as strong as winter. Winter could be over 200 miles an hour up there. But in the summer, we might see 70, 80 miles an hour up at that level. And that still gives them a little bit of help. But the jet stream is what moves all of our fronts, cold fronts, warm fronts, lows, and high pressure systems. And when we get into these particular, what we call weather patterns that are just over our air, they get stuck over the area, it's because basically our jet stream has abandoned us. And typically this time of the year it moves north. You've probably, and Judy, I know you're from Minnesota, so you've probably heard of the terrible rains they had up there around Duluth and the northern half of the state.
Yeah, and my
this past
brother
weekend
is right parallel with Duluth up there.
Yes, so that area, North Dakota, in fact, our friends up in Canada, in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, had quite a bit of severe weather and even a few tornadoes last week, which is common for them this time of the year, actually, in that part of Canada. But that's where the jet stream is hanging out. It's way north, so it's taking the stormy weather up there. And you say, well, how come we're getting so much stormy weather if the jet stream is up there? Well, what our jet stream did recently, we got hot. It was very hot, as you know, over the weekend.
I did notice that.
Yeah, just a little bit toasty out there. So when our jet stream went north, it brought all of this hot air from the south up into our area. Very humid, very hot.
And we didn't like it.
Pardon me?
And we didn't like it.
And we didn't know. I don't like it either. Very, very few people like it unless you live in the water, I think. Maybe the fish like it. That's about it. But at any rate, what happened to break that is we had to get this front that had to come down into the area. And now the front is sitting there. Like I said, the jet stream abandoned us. It's way north. The front is just laying out over central Illinois, and it's just sitting there. And every day, afternoon, early evening, we get the showers and thunderstorms that develop along that front. Because the front, north of the front, wind is from a slightly different direction, maybe a little bit from the northwest or north. South of the front, southwest winds, and when those winds meet each other, they converge, then the air rises and you get the storms. So a little more humid down here, and I was talking to my folks in southern Wisconsin, in Milwaukee, and they were saying, it's cooler today. It was only in the 70s. Moisture, the dew point as we call it, much lower, not as humid as what we have here.
No.
And that makes the difference. That humid air here meeting that slightly drier air to the north, that's what causes these storms to really pop.
No, go ahead, dear.
Well, there are, simple people who want things simplified.
Sure.
First, I'd like for you to define the term jet stream. What in the heck does that mean? And why do they say that on the weather forecasts they'll talk about that there's so much moisture in the air? I don't understand that. I believe them when they tell me that. I'm not
That's
quarreling with it. I just don't get it.
Sure. Well, when we talk about our jet stream, we mean, again, very high wind speeds at about that 35,000 foot level, roughly 7 miles, excuse me, above the ground. And that's just, the jet stream goes all the way around the globe. And I don't want to get too deep into why it's there. It's just because of where we are on the globe and the fact that we're on the blue planet that spins. We rotate, and because of the rotation of our planet and our changing seasons, temperatures change. Our friends in Alaska right now, okay, they've got 1 hour of night time, I think, pretty much. The sun rises at 1 or 2 a.m. and the sun sets close to midnight, so it heats up a little bit more up there, but it's still cool around the Arctic Ocean. And so as the planet rotates, that little difference in temperatures, the cooler air kind of spills down and comes south, and that's kind of what drives the jet stream, keeps the jet stream moving, the rotating planet and the difference in temperatures. So now when it comes to moisture, this time of the year, especially when we've had some rain and we get those southerly winds, a lot of it is the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf of Mexico is really heating up, and we got to watch that very carefully as we get into later July, August especially, in September. We get the hurricanes.
Yes.
That can come up into the Gulf, and the hurricanes feed off of that moist air. Moisture is important to getting clouds, to getting storms, to getting the rain that we need for our grass and crops and vegetation around here. The other way we get a lot of moisture, which is just that it's water vapor. Think about it like when you take a shower and you turn the water on really hot, and it gets and you don't have a fan going on in the bathroom.
Steamy.
It gets very steamy.
Yeah.
And so that's water vapor that is in your room there, in your bathroom there. Same thing with the atmosphere. It gets steamy when you get moisture coming up from that Gulf of Mexico, but also we get moisture from the types of crops we grow here. Corn plants put moisture into the atmosphere. We call it transpiration. That's part of the water cycle. And in fact, I was talking to a group of master naturalists the other day, and the question came up, well, how much moisture is actually put into the atmosphere? And it's really interesting, because if you look at the average acre of corn, so we got some fields around here that are huge, but I'm just talking 1 acre of corn puts off almost 500,000 gallons of water in 1 year, one growing season, into the atmosphere.
Really?
Yes. That's
Holy Friday.
Yes, 1 acre.
Yeah.
That's a lot of moisture. But one large elm tree puts about the same amount of moisture into the atmosphere.
Oh.
Yeah.
Really?
So, yeah.
Well, who do you think in terms of trees, you think they would be reaching up and grabbing the moisture out of the atmosphere? Mm-hmm. But you're saying that they produce moisture that goes into our atmosphere.
They do both, yeah. They recycle a lot of that moisture because it rains. The rain soaks into the ground. The roots of the tree grab that moisture, feed it to the branches and the leaves. But then what happens is the leaves will actually put water vapor. All those leaves, every leaf is putting moisture into the atmosphere.
They perspire?
It's like perspiring, yes, absolutely. But instead of, for us, it stays on our skin. For trees, it doesn't stay on the leaves typically. I mean, it will early in the morning, but then that moisture will go into the atmosphere. It goes off the leaves into the air.
Is that stays on the leaves and the grass, is that the dew then?
That is the dew, absolutely. Yeah, that's the dew that we see every morning. And that is simply because on nights when we have a clear sky, so no clouds in the sky whatsoever at night, our Earth receives sunlight during the day. It heats up, the ground heats up. And I'm not talking about water surfaces, lakes and things like that. I'm just talking about the ground. Mm-hmm. The ground absorbs that moisture. Well, at night, it's kind of like breathing. It's like breathing in. It takes that heat in during the day, and then at night, it lets it go, and it escapes out to the atmosphere. Some goes out to space. So we lose some of the heat. We have to do that, otherwise our planet we would bake. We would always be hot. It'd be like, back, years ago when we had volcanoes going and all that kind of stuff. So our ground has to do that in order to cool off, and that's just, now on the nights when we have clouds, that doesn't, it still puts off the heat, but the clouds intercept it. And think about it like if I had a real bouncy ball here and I bounced it on the ground, it hit the ceiling, it would just keep bouncing around. That's what happens with warm air when there's clouds. At night, the air goes off the ground, hits the clouds, comes back, and it keeps us warmer at night instead of cooling off. And it's the cooling. It's kind of a long-winded explanation, but the cooling of the ground causes the dew to form at grass level, and that develops just almost immediately at sunset. You notice that? I see this happen on the 4th of July when everybody's lying around and they're waiting for the fireworks to start, and it's a nice, clear, hot 4th of July night. and you got your blanket laying out, and you think, okay, everything's doing well here, and then all of a sudden, by the end of the fireworks, you pick up your blanket, and it's
Soggy.
Yeah,
Did somebody spill something on the blanket, or
I hope you're taking notes because we're going to have a pop quiz.
Absolutely, yes, we are going to have a quiz.
9:30. Yeah.
So
Chris, tell us, please.
yeah.
You've been in this weather business 30-some years. Hard to believe.
Yeah.
How did you get involved in as a young man interested in meteorology?
For me,
Which is a pretty heavy science, by the way.
It is.
I took a semester of meteorology so I wouldn't have to take something in chemistry. And about 6 weeks into that course, I said, maybe that wasn't so smart.
It's, meteorology is a real good mix of chemistry and physics and earth science and all these things. I was actually interested in meteorology at about the age of 8 years old, 7 or 8. And what got me interested was I was actually afraid of storms.
Interesting.
I was terrified of thunderstorms. I'd lie there in bed when the nighttime thunderstorms are going off, and the lightning scared me, and just the thought of having a tornado at night just freaked me out. So,
oh dear.
My mom, she was very good with us with that kind of thing, and this is way before the internet or anything like that. Back when people flocked to libraries to look something up, right?
Scandalous.
Yeah. If you had to do a paper or you had to write something or you were interested, you'd call or go to the library. We had a ready reference. We would call ready reference, and they'd look it up for us. Well, my mom took me to the library, and I was interested. Because of the weather, she thought, well, maybe he can calm his fears by looking at some books about the weather. And so I just got fascinated.
Right, ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Boy, you had a good mom.
Yeah, God bless her for that. I tell you, she just she really stoked my interest in that, and then they realized that I had an interest, so my mom and dad bought me all these things for like a backyard weather station. I had my own thermometer and rain gauge and the pressure sensor to the barometer and all that.
They stoked that interest. You had a mild interest, and they stoked it.
They stoked it. They did, and that made a huge difference by reading books about it, and then my parents fostering that interest, and I just. Somewhere in my basement in boxes somewhere, I still have my old handwritten records from from back back in the early 70s when I was keeping weather records in Milwaukee in my backyard.
Isn't that now? Yeah. Did that help you get over being afraid of storms?
It did. It really did. And in fact. I've used that with a number of other people. I've had some people call me at the weather office here in Lincoln. I'll never forget, there was a woman that called and said, my son is just absolutely terrified of storms and tornadoes and things like that, and so could you talk to him? She thought maybe if we talked to him about it, maybe we'd help ease his fears. So we brought him out to the office. We did a brief tour. We talked about it, and I could tell he was he had somewhat of an interest in it, but at the same time he really was fearful of storms. In fact, you mentioned the veterans, the honor flights, and like I said, God bless our veterans. Just amazing people, no matter what conflict or war they've been in. Right. And we received a message just a few weeks ago from a gentleman who was a Vietnam veteran. And he said that he was very open with us, and he told us at the weather office, he told us that he has PTSD, and what bothers him is thunderstorms. The booming thunder to this day, even though it's been almost 50 years since Vietnam. Maybe he was there 45 years ago or so. But the booming thunder reminds him
something
of the shells exploding and things like. And I feel terrible for the guy because you can't stop the thunder. You can't, what do you, you thank him for his service because that was just a terrible conflict over there that they dealt with. But again, how weather impacted that. So there are people that I've come across with an interest in weather, a fear of weather. I've had people say, we used to live on the Gulf Coast. I can deal with a hurricane. I cannot deal with these tornadoes. Tornadoes come up so quickly because hurricanes, typically with satellites and things, we can give people days, and sometimes a week's notice that this is coming. Tornadoes,
Here it is.
you may have 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes before you hear about it. Sometimes it's right on your doorstep when you first hear about it. So,
And speaking
it's
of
tough.
such matters as time, we have to take some time and honor our sponsors, and Mr. Rash is going to be doing that as soon as he can get to the right dials and buttons. Right back live in the studios here this morning is Viewpoint, of course, every Wednesday morning. And one of our favorite guests, Mr. Chris Miller, representing the Weather Service, NOAA, National Oceanic and Space. Help me out.
Atmospheric.
Atmosphere, yeah.
Administration.
Right, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Now, that's a very busy place. It's kind of quiet on the radar, if you excuse a bad pun, out there. Really bad pun. But there's a lot goes on there 24/7. Very quiet operation. You don't drive by and you just look up there and see that big golf ball in the sky there on the left. Or the right if you're coming back west.
Well, there, that's right.
So, tell us about you're telling us about your interest in your meteorology, and what a brilliant mom you had in kind of stemming your fear of storms, which worked.
It did.
And then, when you got out of high school, you went where for your college training?
In high school. High school was a real key thing. I had an awesome guidance counselor in high school. I told her what I wanted to do for a living. And when I first got to that high school, and she said, okay, you need to take as much math and science as you possibly can. And so not only that, but she got me involved during my junior year. It was between my sophomore and junior year in high school. They had a program with the local college where high school kids during the summer for 6 weeks could take college level classes just to get an introduction. So I went to the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee, which is where I grew up and where I was going to high school. And from there, after graduating high school, I went to UW Milwaukee. The meteorology program there at the time was a 5-year bachelor's degree program. So went through all the math and the physics and the chemistry and all that kind of stuff, and then got the meteorology classes for the last 3 years, and it was a really good education. But what I tell kids, and I do lots of talks with college kids. In fact, this past early spring, late winter, early spring, I was out at the University of Illinois talking to kids of the fine program they've got out there, a really good program at U of I in Urbana. And anyway, I told them, I said, look, schooling, very important. Knowing your computers and working with all these kinds of things, very important. But what you really need to do is, how are you going to set yourself apart from the other kids when you're looking for a job? And what I ended up doing when I was in college, I gave them this example. I said, I talked to one of the local, I was fortunate, I had a local television station right there in town. We had all the, ABC, NBC. I went to the NBC affiliate in Milwaukee, and I talked to the guy there who I'd watched on TV as the meteorologist for years. And now this was back, in the 70s and early 80s. Very few TV people were actually meteorologists.
Yeah, right.
They were personalities, and they were, weathercasters, This guy was a meteorologist, has a master's degree in meteorology. He was extremely intelligent. His name was Paul Joseph. Still in Milwaukee. He's retired now. But he gave me an opportunity to learn about the weather and not only see what happens behind the scenes at a television station, but after the news was over, so 10:35, they went over to Johnny Carson and the Tonight Show started, and him and I would sit there in the weather office for sometimes 2 or 3 hours till 1 o'clock in the morning, and we would talk about the weather.
Really?
If there were storms, we would look at radar. If there wasn't any storms, we'd look at all the weather maps, and he would tell me, okay, they're getting some rain or some storms out in Kansas right now. Tell me why. What's causing the rain? Or when are we going to get out of this heat wave? And he taught me more about forecasting the weather than I learned in college.
Interesting.
So I did that for all 5 years I was in college, and the 1 year that after I was out of college looking for work, and I spent 6 years and learned a lot with him. And he's actually the reason I'm here in Illinois, actually. And the reason behind that is
we thank him.
Exactly, because of who it's. I tell my daughters this, tell other kids this too. It's who you know also. Don't make light of maybe the brief conversation you have with somebody as a connection. Make sure you keep that connection with somebody in your field of expertise. And it just so happened, my friend Paul Joseph knew the person who used to be the head of the weather service in the state of Wisconsin at that time, had moved to the Chicago weather office as the head of the weather service for the state of Illinois. A guy by the name of Ray Waldman. And Ray, you mentioned I had 30 years with the weather service. Ray retired with almost 50 years in the weather service.
Oh, boy.
He started when he was 19 years old, and he retired when he was 69. And I went to Chicago, had a meeting with Ray, and Ray said, I'll remember that you stopped by to talk to me. We only had about, a 45-minute visit, but he said, I'll remember that. You have an interest. And I thought, thanks. And so here I'm this, 22-year-old kid thinking, all right, where do we go from here? And it wasn't 6 months later, my phone rang. And it was Ray Waldman on the other end of the phone saying, I remember when you came to visit me, we have an opening at one of our weather offices in Peoria.
I'll be darned.
Would you be interested? And I said, absolutely. I wanted to get my foot in the door. I mean, ideally,
Yes.
I wanted to stay in Milwaukee. It was my hometown.
Sure.
But I thought, hey, Peoria. Yeah. So the first thing I did was I got a map and I figured out where in the world is Peoria.
How do you spell that?
Will I play in Peoria?
Yeah, will I play? And I talked to my grandfather, who was a traveling salesman throughout the 1940s, late 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, his whole career.
Oh my.
He knew exactly where Peoria was. Told me what areas to stay away from. And don't go downtown in certain areas. But at any rate, no, I went to Peoria, and I've stayed here ever since. I love the weather here. Central Illinois is my home now. And it's just, again, it's kind of a long story, but it's a story of looking at all the contacts you have, keeping those in mind, talking to people, but spreading your wings, your horizons. Like I tell the kids when I tell them this story, the students, I said, grades are important.
Yeah.
But it's not everything. It's honestly,
Right.
It's not everything. And we have a young man working at our office part-time this summer, paid position. We don't usually get summertime paid help, but our office was one that was able to have some funding for that this year. And this kid is amazing, and our future looks really bright for weather forecasting and meteorology for the group of kids that take over when the guys like me eventually get to retirement, because some of the things they're teaching the kids in college now, but is great. But this kid is he very active in things. We've had a number of guys at our office the last few years, and some gals too, that are just really sharp, but also very active in their churches, very active in their community that they grew up in, very active with local media. So they see the importance of really spreading their wings.
Solid
Really?
base. Solid base,
It's got to be a solid base.
648-5510. One of you two out there might have a question for Chris. Judy and I just love to have Chris on because he's a cornucopia of knowledge. He's the John Fulton of airways.
Of airways, yes.
So, he points to some interesting things in his background, and not the least of which is being alert and having your antenna up, forming relationships with people. Very, very important.
Very important. In fact, one of the things that I tell students these days too is, again, it's important to have your science classes, your meteorology, your math, and all these things. But every student, to be the well-rounded college graduate, they tell the kids, well, you need to take some extra classes. And I know when I was in school, I kind of struggled with it. What am I going to take? Well, what sounds interesting? I don't know. I'll take Greek mythology or something like that. Just
Out of
just
the
to
blue.
to fulfill these credits.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll take a foreign language or something. But I tell these kids, I said, probably one of the best classes that you can take would be in the sociology or psychology realm. And the reason for that is because we could be the greatest minds in weather and meteorology that you can that could be out there. But if you don't know people and how to communicate that information to people that they can understand it, then you're wasting your time. Because you can know everything there is to know about the storm, but unless you tell somebody about what is going to happen in terms that they can relate to, people are not going to understand or even care about the information you're providing.
Right.
So we've spent a lot of time over the years with our forecast staff at the weather office here in Lincoln, and all the weather offices, all 122 across the country, really looking into this. We've gone through lots of training and that type of thing. And that's really the direction that our agency is going, is to provide support to people that need the weather information to make decisions. And that's whether it could be everything from the emergency management level, the fine folks at the Logan County EMA office, like Dan Fulcher, Kendall Carruthers is out there now since Terry Storer retired. For them to make decisions to help the communities of Logan County recover or prepare ahead of time before storms come in, all the way to somebody's trying to make a decision, should I have that picnic? Should we go fishing today? Should we? Because I don't want to get caught on the lake during a lightning storm. Or the fish bite best during this time, when it's cool or warm. So it's agriculture, obviously. This is a hotbed for agriculture in this area. Needing to know what exactly are the conditions going to be like at a certain time of the day, because I need to do a spraying operation. Or when's the rain coming in, because can I get into the fields to harvest in the fall before everything starts to get wet and everything's dried down right where I want it, so I've got 12 hours, or do I have 18 hours, or how much time do I have? So it's all about providing the information and knowing what people need in all these various areas. So we've really spent a lot of time doing that, and we continue to do that. In fact, in August, we're going to have a team of people down in Springfield at the state fair. During the whole run of the fair, we will be there to provide weather support to the director of the state fair and the state police, who provide security out there, so that they can make decisions based on preparing. Yeah, when do we shut down the sky glider? When should the carnival? How far away is the lightning? How long do we have? Do we need to do something with the Grandstand Act?
Yeah. That
type of thing, because they have tens of thousands of people over there. You don't want storms hitting or have lightning striking when you have all these people standing around out on the fairgrounds.
Not good.
And people are there to have a good time. We don't want the people aren't, okay, oh gosh, I better pay attention to what's going on with the weather. I mean, that's important, but we just want to let people know, like, hey, we've got your back, and it's the same thing here at the Logan County Fair. Dan Fulcher and the folks at the EMA, they keep a close eye on the weather around the fairgrounds, and if they see something getting close, they call us at the weather office here in Lincoln, and we'll tell them, okay, the storms are this far away, they'll be there at this time. I did this for the state police last year at the state fair, and I'll never forget the commander who was down there on the fairgrounds. He said, look, he says, we see lightning in the distance. When's it going to get here? And I said, 9 o'clock, 9 p.m. And he said, okay, we better end. They had a free Grandstand Act that night. He said, we better get this Grandstand Act wrapped up and get everybody out of there before 9 o'clock.
I'll be darned.
Lightning started hitting nearby at 9:02, and he came in there and he said, I have a complaint. He said, you guys were off by 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'll take that one.
Now, Chris, with all the... Go ahead, honey. Go right ahead, please. Because you might lose that idea in the next 30 seconds.
You're darn right. Oh. Boy, you know me well. You mentioned at the outset of the program something about the Gulf of Mexico and its change, and you said we have to watch that. Am I supposed to be scared or what?
Or
No,
go
well-
get your serape out.
Yeah.
don't want you to be scared, but no, it's just we're going to get into that time of the year here as we get through into the heat of the summer, and we've already had the heat, so it could be a little bit early season. But we, as a weather community, we watch that very carefully for tropical storms. And you might say, well, shoot, we're up here in the middle of Illinois. What does that do for us? Number one, traveling, family members, that type of thing. I'll tell you, last year at the Balloon Festival, Hurricane Harvey was about to hit around south of Houston. And then eventually into the Houston area. And one of the most commonly asked questions when we were out at the Balloon Festival was, I have family down in southeast Texas. When is that hurricane going to hit? Or we're traveling to Houston next week. What can I expect? And so, bring your boat, bring your flippers with you, because it's going to be a lot of water down there. But the remnants of hurricanes sometimes come up here into the Midwest. I was using the example of 2012, and I remember I was on the program with you guys that summer, and we talked about the drought and just how terrible the drought was, and we were suffering. It was hot, and temperatures got above 100, and we just couldn't buy a raindrop. And we were looking for the remnants of a hurricane to break that drought, and sure enough, we finally got
happened.
Hurricane Isaac, I think, came up around Labor Day weekend and dumped a whole bunch of rain on us, and that broke the drought. So we do get remnants of hurricanes here, and the key for us is very heavy rain. I don't care if that hurricane can go all the way up to Wisconsin, all the way to Michigan, southern Canada, the remnants of it, they're going to get a lot of rain, even though it's that far away from where it started. So we watch those for very heavy rainfall, and they can also spin out tornadoes as well as they move through.
Chris, with the advent of technology, and Lord knows it comes faster than the clock spins, almost, does that have an impact on your need for personnel, for bodies at weather stations?
That's a great question, Bill, because I tell you what, with technology, we're hearing in so many various businesses, industries, and whatever, okay, technology, there go half the jobs in the market or what have you. For us, technology is enhancing more what we can do and the type of information we can give to people. But we look at it from the standpoint of our staffing is really not going to change very much. And the reason for that is kind of what I was talking about, sharing information with people that need it to make decisions. Because the more information there is, the more room there is for us to interpret that information and share it with people. So the human factor is still very, very much alive, very important. We haven't figured out a way yet for computers to issue warnings for storms and that type of thing. Computers can give us some kind of an idea what the storms are going to do, but not to the level when you get to the local weather. How is it affecting my community or my area of the county?
What would be an average entry level wage for somebody who wants to get into meteorology?
Well, depending on where they're hired, if it's with us at the National Weather Service, the entry level starting wage is right around $40,000 a year. Private weather, there are a lot of private weather forecasting companies popping up all over the country.
Sure.
They have specific clients, newspapers, media stations, but also that contractor, the big contractor that's going to lay some asphalt, and they don't want to waste a bunch of money on whether or not it's going to rain on the job site or that type of thing. They pay for weather forecasting services to get that information. Those places start people out at a much lower wage. They usually start out in it's about 25 to 35,000. Yeah, it's not a lot of money. I always tell people, we get into this business because of our passion for science and the weather.
Well, that's pretty obvious in your case.
And not to make money. There's only one meteorologist that I know of that has done a really good job of making a ton of money in this profession, and that's our buddy Tom Skilling up in Chicago.
Well, yeah.
Tom Skilling,
he's been gosh, for number of years.
Yes,
a number of years.
When I was a small boy, I grew up watching him in Milwaukee. He started his career in Milwaukee at a television station there, at CBS affiliate. And anyway, Tom is a nationally known person, great meteorologist, wonderful man. I've had the opportunity to talk to him a couple times, and he's just a great guy. He's earned every penny he makes. I tell you, the Chicago Board of Trade comes to a stop when he gives his weather forecast.
Is that right?
Oh yeah, because they want to see what's Tom going to say about the upcoming week, and then even the outlook beyond, because that's going to determine
Well,
prices.
I haven't listened to him so long. I gave up on WGN many years back. They used to be a real good radio station, and then their philosophy didn't jive with mine. So I just left him off the dial. Are jobs plentiful for a bright young college graduate?
At the moment, they're not extremely plentiful. But I tell you, it's growing because a number of other businesses are hiring meteorologists. We see wind farms coming up all over the place.
Yes.
Lots of energy companies out there. Energy companies are hiring meteorologists to determine where should we put the wind farms, how much are we going to generate in terms of electricity and things like that. So that is probably the biggest growing industry. Transportation and shipping. Hiring a lot of meteorologists. So all the airlines have their own groups of meteorologists. UPS, FedEx, they have a whole cadre of meteorologists because they're flying packages all over the world. And when you say you're going to get it, pay extra money to get it there the next day. Well, the weather's going to determine if that plane can take off.
That's right.
So yeah, to make that promise, they have to have a group. But the Weather Service, we're going to be. We just had a big hiring push here the past several months, and then we're going to have another one coming up because in the next few years, when people like me start retiring, they hired a lot of meteorologists back in the 80s. We're all getting to that retirement age, and so there's going to be a lot of opportunities coming up.
Could I ask you to pick up your crystal ball there and look forward about 10 days and prognosticate what's going to happen to us the rest of summer?
In a nutshell, more of the same, hot and humid. In fact, I was telling Jeff number 2 out here just before we came on the air, it's looking pretty hot. We're going to get into another hot spell here, just like what we had, probably the middle part of next week, middle to the end of next week. So, and then we get into July, more of the same. We're not going to break out of this. We talked about weather patterns.
Yes.
We're stuck in this weather pattern. And summer has not even really started yet.
No, it hasn't, but it's due to start in just a couple of days.
Tomorrow,
In the days before Mr. Carrier made air conditioning universal in all homes, we used to go to movies because they were air conditioned. So it enhanced the movie attendance because they were the only people who could do that. I tell you, Chris Miller, it's a joy to have you. Judith and I just look forward to having you here a couple times a year to kind of keep us on our toes. The only thing I remember about my meteorology courses is several types of clouds, like nimbus, cirrus, cumulonimbus, and all those. Don't ask me to define them. We always try to close with a quote about the weather, and this comes from our friend Samuel Langhorne, Mr. Mark Twain. Climate is what we expect. Weather's what we get. That's about the basic. Thank you, Chris Miller, very, very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.